Hey everybody, we're at the Imp and the Ogre. My name's Paul.
This is Ryan.
And today we're talking about Death House.
Yeah, so Death House this was published as an appendices in the Curse of Strahd adventure that's published by Wizards of the Coast in 2016. It was written by Chris Perkins. So why are we talking about an adventure that's in an appendices in a published adventure? Because it's available for free on the Wizards of the Coast website, and free things are good things. So we wanted to talk about it to see if it's worth your time. Is it worth the price tag of free? Yes.
Yeah, it is. It is. 100% it's worth the price tag of free. Overall impression of the Death House, I was bored for most of it until the end. And it has probably one of the most fantastic finales, which could be go horribly wrong in the best kind of way. And it was really fun to read about, and I think it could be really, really fun to run.
I think this could be the best start and end to your adventure, all in one scenario. So just to sort of put it into context here, the adventure was designed to get new players from level 1 to level 3, because Curse of Strahd starts from at level 3 and runs to who knows what. I'm going to just full disclosure here. I have not read Curse of Strahd. All of my Ravenloft memories are definitely coming from like 2nd edition campaign box set information stuff. I read I6, Ravenloft a million years ago, so I fully admit that my memory might be foggy on that, and if I do mess anything up, if I bring out any lore, I apologize. I definitely have no idea how it's been updated, if at all, for 5th edition. So yeah, I just want to get that out of the way first. So by default, I mean, I don't even know if you know anything about Ravenloft.
No, I make it up as I go.
It's a cool campaign setting. You should learn a little bit about it. But the whole point of this was to be a preamble, just to get you up to snuff. But that being said, as a haunted house adventure, I think it's pretty solid. And I think we'll mostly be talking about it on its own merits, not as its merits as an introductory adventure to Curse of Strahd, because I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff in here that is linked to it, it's easily removed. Like, I mean, there's some mentions of it. There are, I think there's a statue of Strahd in here at one point. A letter from him easily could be changed to any type of random anything.
Yep.
Right? You just need some sort of worshipable entity that's dodgy.
Yeah.
I don't even say it has to be evil per se, but it could easily be replaced by any fiend or
something omnipotent almost, that he doesn't care about what's going on.
Yeah. Some sort of Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. What to use specifically, or something that would be angered by attention would work also, I think, as well.
Yeah, but the one point of contact from whatever entity you choose to do this is that he does send them a letter. Like, I think that's cool. Yeah, that is like, he's a person that sends him a letter that's like, I don't care, but you're still my minion. You know, like, I don't want you to do anything that you're doing, but like, keep doing it.
So yeah, I mean, that's assuming you keep the letter in there. Like, as is, it's kind of neat. Doesn't need to be in there at all, but we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. Now, I will say that the adventure is designed to be run for first level characters, with the intention that they would get to 3rd level by the end.
Yep.
For reasons that I will elaborate on shortly, I don't think you should send first level characters into here. I think this is a beautiful level 2 to level 3 adventure. You go in at level 2, you come out at level 3.
Yeah, and everything would be a challenge for level 2s.
Well, I mean, most of the adventure, the expectation is that you are dealing with a level 2 party.
Yeah.
Right, like, with the exception of like 2 fights.
Yeah.
You're going to be level 2, or your party is going to be level 2 anyways, so I don't know that it would really affect the overall flow that much, and would get over one of my major criticisms about, I mean, not just this adventure, but like adventures in general. I can't remember. Did we say who wrote this one? I said Chris Perkins.
Chris Perkins wrote this, and at Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of mentions in the.
He was the lead designer.
He's the
on it.
lead
I just can't
designer.
remember if we said at the beginning. I do want to give credit where credit is due.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
The start of Death House could not be a more straightforward hook than there could ever be. Literally, there is a debilitating fog that leads you directly to the house.
Well, I mean, as someone who knows nothing about Ravenloft, you don't understand about the mists of Barovia, which, your loss, but one of the main shticks about Ravenloft is it's basically like a demi-plane, and it's controlled by, ruled over-ish by a vampire count by the name of something, Strahd von something or other. I can't remember what his last
Von.
I can't remember what his last name is. I completely Strahd. Yeah, Count Strahd. I completely forget. I apologize for that. But and it's not really so much that like he controls it completely. He's like in charge of it, but the demiplane itself is almost like a punishment due to reasons that you would learn about in the original Ravenloft adventure and presumably in Curse of Strahd. But basically what happens is that individuals from other planes of existence, if you will, are transferred, brought to Ravenloft. So you'd be, camping in the woods, and this mist would roll in, and then you'd wake up in the morning, and suddenly you're no longer in Kansas anymore. You're in Barovia, which is, and there's stuff like, Strahd brings in playthings from other realms and whatnot. But from my recollections, and once again, these are from like stuff I read 20 years ago, it's not only him doing the controlling, and some of the aspect is the demiplane itself. So you'd be brought into this from elsewhere. So you could literally pop in someone from anywhere if you were running this in Barovia. And I will say that like if you're running this as in your own campaign, does not have to be in Barovia. This house can literally be in any town
Anywhere.
Whatsoever.
Yeah.
Right, because the default setup is like the mists basically force you into the house and don't let you leave the house until you resolve the issue, which is, I get its use thematically for running a Ravenloft game. Obviously, if you're running it in a different setting, then you kind of should let your players leave. You just need to make sure there's enough incentive in there for them to be
Come back.
wanting to explore it,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's a weakness of it. And we'll talk about like the actual hook here in a second. You can tell everyone about it. But I would say that it's kind of a weak reason to be in there, and only certain players would be motivated enough to even stay, right? Especially when you don't find anything to begin with. It's kind of boring.
Yeah. And yeah, you're right.
I like to use treasure, right? So like if they're looking for something, a golden idol or some reason to be there, some mystery to unwrap, then they'd be more likely to come back if they could leave. Right? As is, it's just you get them inside and they can't leave until they figure out the mystery. So I don't like that so much.
Which I guess you could change the hook in the beginning to suit those needs
Instead of
well, I guess the hook is that you get directed to a road, effectively, and there's two children on the road, well-dressed. One's a 10-year-old girl and a 7-year-old boy or something around there, just young kids. Say that there's a monster in their basement and that they won't go back into the house until the monster's gone. So there's the hook.
And that's supposed to be enough to get your players to go into a house.
And I mean, I guess like you could use the fog that if they're just like, we'll go down the road, that they, get in this continual loop of coming back on the children and going back into the house. They go down the road
and they're back on the other end again.
So you could use that, or as Ryan was saying, you could put something more intriguing in the bottom. Say that they need their family heirlooms or something. You put something more interesting that would be an item incentive for them to go and get. The pendant or the ring or the dad's sword or.
Well,
I don't know. What would you put down there?
I wouldn't use the children at all. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, and I forgot to put the disclaimer, but obviously we're going to spoilers incoming, right? Like whenever we're talking about adventures, we're obviously going to ruin it for you if you don't want to know anything in it. But the idea is that the children are not actually children.
They're ghosts.
They're not even ghosts. They're illusions,
yes,
generated by the house. I understand you're mixing it up because we're going to meet them
ghost
as ghosts.
children later.
They're going to be the same children later, which is kind of my problem. You're reusing it. So the idea is that they're illusions, which means that doesn't seem very hard for your players to figure out they're not real. Anybody tries to touch one of them, poof.
And
right?
also the children will follow you to the stoop of the house, but they won't go in, and they disappear if they get tried or forced to go in the house, right? So they're already gone already. Your players just be like, ugh.
Well, it's easy for them to figure out something that something's not, okay about the whole situation. So it doesn't take much for that to occur. So any type of sort of danger adverse players are like, well, this is obviously a trap.
Yep.
Let's not go in there. And then suddenly the whole adventure doesn't happen. So what I like about the hook is that it's the idea that the house itself is malevolent, which is fits into the whole spooky Barovia type of aspect, and is a pretty good trope when you think about any type of...
It's like a sentient being.
Yeah, and lots of great haunted house, books and movies and stuff use that idea that it's the house itself is evil due to so many bad things happening inside of it. So I like that idea. I don't like the idea of using the children as bait. So if I was going to change it, especially if I wasn't using Ravenloft, if this was just in some random city, is I like the idea of the house controlling or possessing like a random person in town. Like there's an old caretaker or something like that the whole job quote unquote of the caretaker is to find prey for the house.
Right.
So they're out there, spreading rumors about, the old so-and-so's house. Yeah, I hear that there's, they did all kinds of crazy, rituals in there and amassed a giant amount of treasure or whatever. Like whatever type of lure that your players appreciate, be it mystery, be it flat out money in there, you can use that hook, right? And it still fits into the whole, the house is using something. And I kind of like that trope a little bit more. And that's something like I'm not being creative here. Like this is a pretty common thing, having a mortal, recruiting prey for the vampire or what have you, right? So like that kind of, and it totally can be okay that there's something a little off about this NPC, maybe he's a little glassy-eyed or just a little creepy or has poor hygiene or something like that.
Something
like
strange.
It could be has a limp. It's the grave digger, like it can be whatever type of fun trope you want. But I think it makes more sense to have something, I don't know, a little bit more tailored to your party to tempt them to being in there. Because you really want them to want to explore the house.
Yeah, and change the name of the kids if you run this and use them.
Why? What's wrong with Rose and Thorn? It's Rosevalia and Thornvold.
Whatever. So, like, I don't know. Like,
okay, now in defense of the writing, it's a very Ravenloft ridiculousness. So that is city setting specific. So once again, if you're using non-Ravenloft, feel free to use less ridiculous names. But it is D&D, and ridiculous names come with D&D.
It's all right, I guess. They're just funny.
Their parents like thematic names.
I guess so. Yeah.
So however they get into the house, we are in the house now. So I don't think you have much to say about the first couple levels of the house. Now, if you look at the map, which it's free, download it, take a look at it. It's a 3-story house, and then there's like a sub-level dungeony area.
I didn't like the house in the fact that it's just big and there's lots to explore. I loved that every mural or every painting, there was something more to it. That I think one was described that it was like a picture of children dancing, but if they looked closer, they're actually like running from bats.
Yeah.
Or if they look at the garden, that they're not leaves, they're like eyeballs. Like lots of cool little stuff like that, where if your players are really taking the time to look at things, that there's great description in the adventure, that they would figure out like, well, not only have they been brought here by something that wants them to be there, but like something weird happened here. You know, it was a strange house meant for strange things.
So here's a tangential question to you here, as someone who runs games, right? The perception checks to notice that are ridiculously low.
Yeah.
Would you just allow passive perception to pick that up?
I would, hard to say. You would describe the pieces for sure. I guess you could describe them as saying that there's like an interesting mural. Mm-hmm. And then I guess if they said, what is the mural of? Like you could give a brief description of the painting, because like, yeah, I guess you're going to notice that anyway, which is why it would be low. But the small details, yeah, I guess they just have to explicitly say that they want to look at it more closely. But I don't know if you'd offer those details on a passive perception.
Yeah, fair enough. So I don't know. It's just one of those things that I've never really managed to hammer out well. Like when you use passive perception or when is appropriate. Like for me, I would kind of, I don't know. It'd be like if someone says I check for traps, or I'm checking for traps as we go on, like that's when I'd use a passive perception, you know, instead of making them roll every 5 feet of it. So like, I don't know. I mean, this is sort of like,
I guess, but even for traps, like if the trap DC to find the trap anyway is lower than their passive perception, I guess you could assume that it's just not like a very well hidden trap. But if the trap DC to find it is higher than their passive perception, then they would still trigger it. I think I wouldn't just like automatically give that to them.
I don't know. Like,
I think of it like as if I was walking down the street, how much am I paying attention to this stuff? Right? Yeah. Like I'll notice someone drinking a coffee. I don't know if they're drinking a coffee or a latte.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's just that's what I'm always sort of unsure about in running 5th edition games, is like what. I mean, there might be an errata on here, and I'm sure there's like giant Reddit threads on passive perception and passive insight and passive rolls, you know, in general when it's appropriate. But like, I don't know. It's just something I was curious to get your opinion on, whether someone would have to be actively looking for that. You know, saying that they are going to investigate to that level of detail, and you wouldn't pick up on it just walking into the room.
I think for the first time, for like a specific instance like this, that you've got a painting, you know, if you ran quickly by this, what we're sitting next to, which is a painting of like a mountain and forest with little monsters painted into it, you might not notice some of the monsters, but if you looked at it more closely, so maybe for the first time, if I wouldn't give it to them, but maybe you could assume that once they had found one curiosity in an artwork, that the players would probably maybe taking a little bit more time to look at the other things in the house closely. So I guess that's just DM discretion.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting trying to figure out how to interpret those types of rules. Yeah. You know, like, because I guess it depends on how you run your game. Like, do you just say roll for perception every time, or do you let your players look? But
if you choose to omit these details from this adventure, you're losing on a huge part of the flavor of the house.
Oh, I agree.
So
100%.
you have to let them find this some way to make it more fun, because the house is pretty boring. Like there's like, aside from these details, in my opinion, that made it more interesting, that gave them a reason to want to go to the second floor, go to the third floor, and keep exploring. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's partly why I think you need to have some sort of like something they're looking for, right, to actually get there. But I don't know. It's how much information do you give them from just like a passive glance through the room? And I fully agree. Like, this is one of those adventures that you kind of need to describe all of these boring rooms in enough detail, because, as we'll talk about, when things go crazy at the end, there are environmental consequences to what's in the rooms.
Yeah. This is one of those, like the way that the finale of this adventure goes, that if you could somehow manipulate your players into wanting to betray one of their own players at the end, that it would be a far more memorable, even if everyone died, adventure ever that they would ever run, probably. So this is one of the instances where I think player specific information could be useful too, that just share the details with the person with the highest perception, or maybe like plant little seeds of things along the way that, or doesn't really lead anything to the house of appeasing the house, or there's nothing that leads to the fact that like maybe you could sacrifice something at the end. Like they're supposed to figure it on their own, but you could, I think in the house you could make it a lot more exciting if you led like breadcrumb trails that the best way to do this would be to sacrifice one of their own.
Well, I
players.
mean, this could partly be the hook too.
Yeah.
That like there's a way of gaining power, right? You could have the house whispering to one or another. Like, I mean, if you have players that aren't good,
Yeah.
right, don't have to be evil. If they're just neutral players, then you can just start passing them notes or whispering in their ear that you hear this. And that ties into sort of what I wanted to talk about next is like, this is a haunted house. And for a haunted house, it doesn't get spooky for a very long time.
Not
right?
at all. It's not even, it's barely haunted.
It is barely haunted at the beginning. So, I mean, if I was running this, I would definitely want to put at least something in the first little bits, the first 2 floors, right, which can take a while to get through, that suggest a haunting, like that there's actually something wrong with the house, and just like standard stuff, like you just have music coming from another room or whispered conversation, and especially if, I mean, what I would probably do is, as long as the players are all together, I'd probably have very minor stuff in other rooms. So
Right.
like doors closing behind you, or music in another room, or conversation in another room, or scream coming from somewhere. But if someone goes to explore something individually, that's when suddenly like a book rises off of the shelf and goes onto a table.
The face of the picture follows you across the room.
Exactly. There's somebody standing behind you in the mirror. You know, like that type of classic stuff, but only have it happen when there's only one player in the room, because then you get that whole like, at least the idea of like, okay, yeah, sure, buddy, right? Like, I mean, granted, yes, you're all sitting around a table, everyone knows that there's hauntings are real, but I kind of like the idea that the scarier stuff happens
when you're alone.
when you're alone. And that being said, like, I have played scenarios where once players figured this out, they were more likely to go by themselves because they wanted to see cool things. And then you can obviously escalate this, and that ties into like promises of power and that type of stuff as well. So it's one way that I would probably do it, just to try to make it a little bit more interesting, to engage them a little bit more. Because yeah, I agree with you 100% that unless there's some sort of MacGuffin that they're looking for, like, why would you even go up the first set of stairs? I completely agree with that. So they make it through all this junk, right? They get through this stuff. One thing I did want to talk about is on the second level. This is where that letter comes into play. There's a secret room that the players presumably might find. This comes back once again into like passive perception, and you know, do you let them find a secret door if they're not looking for a secret door in a bookshelf? Anyways,
well, before you get to like, this is another, like, I play with a group who loves playing on a map. So they would want like to be on the map of like, it's just that would be a lot of drawing, you know, like to do every single floor without having just to describe everything as you go. It's like a lot of map preparation. And I mean, obviously I wouldn't do it for them, but I know they'd feel a little let down without actually being able to move through.
Well, that's when you got to use, was it the Roll20? They have all the digital maps for most of this stuff. So
yeah, I guess so.
If you're, it only works for certain published ones. Like, no, I totally feel you here.
Theater of mind needs to be used quite a bit in this adventure.
Well, there's a lot of empty rooms. Once again, the descriptions are super important for reasons that we'll get to. But so behind the secret door on the second floor, there's an open chest. There's a dead adventurer hanging out of it. I think they triggered a trap and then they died. And then this is where you find the letter, and there's a bunch of stuff. I think it's mostly plot hook stuff that ties into Curse of Strahd. So if you're not running the whole like campaign, put whatever you want in there. Like it's a good place to put any type of like leads that you want your players to follow up in the future.
I loved the letter. I thought that was one of the best parts of the house. That it's like a letter addressed to the denizens of the house, the mom and the dad, who were basically luring in and killing people to try and sacrifice them to Strahd. But the letter was just like, yo, don't care. Great that you guys are my fans, love it. Like just blah blah blah, and then at the end he's just like your master forever. Like,
well, it's funny. Like, I mean, this is getting it plot wise. I'm not sure if the players actually ever figure this out. But the whole thing at the end, though, is that the cult, which is what's happening in the house here, ends up luring and killing adventurers that Strahd had lured to play with himself. So he gets angry and he just kills them all.
It's a lure inception. They lured the lure. Yeah. So I liked the letter. I thought it was funny and.
Well, I think it does a good job of character development for Strahd von Zarovich. There's his name. I think that's his name. But it's completely unnecessary if this is being run in like Waterdeep or Sharn or any of the great cities that you could be running this in your own campaign. So. Use whatever type of plot hooks you want in there. But yes, I think it is a very cool flavor thing, especially if you're doing a Ravenloft campaign.
It lends itself well to like the boredom of an immortal thing, like an ageless thing,
the indifference.
That you would still like find the time to write the letter because it's like something to do, but you don't care about like what's actually going on. They're just like, yeah, all right, why not, guys?
He's an aristocrat. He's got manners. Exactly. He got mail. He replied to his fan mail. Like that says a lot about him. It's not a form letter. He wrote a personal letter. I will say though that like if you have a dead adventurer, they kind of need some equipment on them. I would say that was the one glaring thing that I found in this whole adventure is like, really? Like, you couldn't have given them something cool? Like, I'm not going to say, like, a magic item. Like, give them some lockpicks or something. Like, there's some loot in this room. Like, the treasure chest has stuff in it.
Yeah.
But, come on. Like, it broke the immersion for me.
A little bit, yeah.
That it was a prime situation to add something, especially if you wanted to help your players out early on. Even just, like, a potion
or like
something.
Like a flavor item, like a steak.
Steak.
Like make him like a vampire hunter. Like add something interesting in that.
He's got a wreath of garlic around his neck, and he's got a bandolier of steaks on it. Like that's.
So then,
cool.
like maybe like they find him, and like then now your players think they're looking for maybe a vampire, right? Which they're not looking for in this instance, but it's like the connection is there. So you could guess throw that in there. That would be kind of cool.
That's super fun. I like that a lot.
One of the things to mention about the house too, if your players for some reason are like, let's just burn this down. That there's this house is regenerating, so they could just be like, yeah, all right, house is burned down, problem solved. You let them go back to town. Next time they try to leave, the mist leads them back to, and they're back to square one, right? Yeah. So it regenerates over a certain amount of days and hours. And
once again, like if you're running this in Barovia, right?
Yeah.
If you're running a different one, then like you're. That's why I would say if you're running this in a different setting, if you're running this as a homebrew, then you have to have something in there that they want to get that they can't dig out of the ashes.
Right.
Like if they burn it down, then sure, they burned it down. Great. You got rid of the haunting. Now you don't get your magic awesome thing of fantasticness, right? Yes. Especially if like they're looking for like a map or maybe like a grimoire with arcane information, like that type of thing. So there should be some sort of penalty to them, right? The default setting forces them to do it. Like you can't get away from doing the house.
I guess one of the like now thinking about it, that the kids in the beginning, if you choose to use the kids, say that there's a monster in the basement, but there's no stairs that lead down on the first floor. Yeah. So I guess if they're thinking critically about this, their players would be like, okay, well, weird, right? So there's more to it than just the floors of going up. Yeah.
That actually kind of ties into, too, we might as well mention at this point, there are stairs. You just can't find them at the beginning because the house won't let you.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
There's like Metroid-style unlocking of doors.
It's not even Metroid style. It's like, well, the house doesn't want you to know. Right? And this comes up again when we get to the top floor, finding the secret door up there. Right? So the house doesn't let you know. So putting some stuff in there to really like let people know that the house is an entity, even just like making the walls groan or something like that would definitely help some of the believability of these later weird things. Yeah. Anywho. Second floor, I can't remember what we were talking about before we got on our little...
I don't know. You eventually get up to another. I think the second floor has the handmaiden's ghost. The third floor.
It's third floor. So all the fun stuff happens on the third floor. Now, first and foremost, this is where it comes into like describing the rooms is really important. because in a lot of the rooms there's ornamental armor. I mean, granted, they don't say it's ornamental armor, but presumably it's ornamental armor.
Yeah.
So, you want to point that out because on the landing of the 3rd floor, there's a suit of ornamental armor that punches you if you walk by it. There's a suit of animated armor. So I think it's kind of important to foreshadow that because that's your first actual encounter in the house. And it's animated armor, whatever. They shouldn't have any difficulty doing it, but that's the first time where something hostile happens.
Yeah.
Unless you put something somewhere else. And I'm okay with that, but I think some more foreshadowing is necessary. Because basically at this point, this is where all the crazy stuff happens. This is where there's the animated broom.
Yep.
One minor complaint about this is that the information about the animated broom is in another appendix of Curse of Strahd. So if you just get this off of the internet, off of the Wizard's website, then yeah, you don't get that information. So bad form. But, you just make up whatever you wanted there. I'm sure it's nothing too crazy. So the furniture starts attacking you, a la Poltergeist. And this is where we have the nursemaid, right? There's the ghost that you get to fight.
Which can be triggered in 2 different ways. One, if you go into a certain room first, the ghost will just attack you anyway. Yeah. Or you can encounter her at her skeletal remains. On the
attic, right? There's
so
2
you
different
can,
triggers.
you can avoid an encounter later on by doing it earlier.
Yeah,
which is you're doing it no matter what, but it just depends when you do it.
So it's fine. It's a ghost. It's letting you get some of the spookiness in there. The one thing that I thought you could up the spookiness with is there's what appears to be a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes in the room that turns out to be empty, which I'd put something in there, personally. I don't know what I'd put in there at this point. Maybe a zombie baby, just for grossness, I guess. I don't know. Or there's probably animated dolls would be pretty fun in there too. To put a little baby doll in there and that's actually animated. That could be kind of fun as well. You don't need it at all, but it's kind of a letdown when you play up something so there's a baby in it and there was a ghost in here and what's in the baby? Oh, it's nothing. All right. Moving on, right? So I thought that was a bit of a letdown. Me personally. Another thing in here is to get to the attic, which is the next floor, there's secret doors. And I might be misreading something, but the players can totally miss the secret doors. There's 2 of them. There's one on either side. But there's nothing that forces them to find it. Mm-hmm. Right? So if they don't find the secret doors, which they might because they're where's the kids' bedroom? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's much merit to there necessarily being secret doors, or maybe try to telegraph it a little bit more than the way it's written. And I don't want to spend
whatever
right?
Let the house open it up for them or something.
So you hear noise opening behind them and there's a secret door or something.
Because the whole point of this is that your players get to the top floor so they can go down. So if your players don't make it to the top floor, your adventure is done. Well,
and if you're playing this in Barovia, the mists aren't going to let you leave, so you may have to find it eventually. So why make it a secret door?
And it can be frustrating when you're sitting there and your players can't figure it out and it seems obvious to you, but it's not obvious for them, and that can be a trap. So
well, then what you end up having is players are we take 20 on our search in every single room, and they just end up combing everything, and nobody wants to play that way either. So just be aware of that. So you get to the attic, and there's a couple of things going on here, but the big one is this is where you actually find
no, isn't the kids' floor on the lower level because they find the secret doors by looking through the dollhouse?
No, that's the secret door to get to the basement. Yeah, there's a lot of secret doors in this. It's completely ridiculous. You got to get all the way to the top because there's stairways that go from the top of the house all the way down to the basement because of reasons. So you finally get, that's basically it. You get to the attic and you find a locked door.
Yeah.
The key to this is just in the library, I think. It's not something hard to find. The players just need to have found it.
To note, it's locked from the outside.
Dun, dun, dun. And inside you find the
remains of the children.
The remains of the children. And depending on what you play around with, you can get the ghosts of the children to appear.
Yep.
And it's just They're good ghosts. I think it even flat out says that they're...
Yeah, they'll attack if attacked, but otherwise they just give you information and will possess players.
They'll possess players out of loneliness, but they don't even like full on possess you. You just get some modifiers.
You get a flaw. Yeah. You get a...
While they're possessing you, which is fine. I think it's kind of flavorful stuff. They give you hints to try to figure out how to get to the actual lower level. They talk about their dollhouse, and their dollhouse. If you poke around the dollhouse, you can find the secret door, which it
may, like, I assume that the dollhouse was a replica of the house.
It has
like
to
it doesn't.
be.
It doesn't say that
say,
explicitly, but it says if they investigate the dollhouse, that they'll find the secret doors in the house. So I just assumed that the dollhouse was a replica of the house.
And then finding the secret door in the attic in the dollhouse reveals the secret door.
Yeah.
In the attic,
like the house.
So this is, you get to this point, so not much has happened, and this is where I'm gonna have a bit of a sticking point with the way as the adventure is currently written, because at this point you now advance to level 2.
Woo!
Yeah, you found a secret door,
and you are 3 times as powerful as you were.
Exactly. You now know how to cast magic. You can turn into animals by the power of finding a secret door. And this is personally just a pet peeve with, I mean, I have no problem with, like, what's the word they use for it these days? Blah, 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 experience points.
Oh, like gated or whatever it is.
It's milestone.
Milestone
Experience or milestone leveling. That's totally fine. This is just a me thing. I've never liked this. This is not even a 5th edition issue, but I've never liked the idea of leveling up in the middle of an adventure.
Nobody starts at level 1 anyway. Very few... any players or DMs that I think have played D&D before would probably all start at level 2 anyway.
Yeah, which is a separate issue to discuss. But the adventure by design is the idea that you go from level 1 to level 3.
Yep.
And the way you get from level 1 to level 2 is by finding a secret door. And that to me is just like, come on. And it's not even so much like that giving you the experience to get it, but like at what point in this adventure has a druid finally figured out how to change his form? Because they get that power, right? Like, it just this is a me thing that, like, I feel that you need to have a training montage.
Yeah.
Right? And this is something that older editions did by default. Like, you had to find someone to train with. If you wanted to learn more about magic, you had to find someone who would teach you more about magic. And, you know, you could make it as hard or as easy as you wanted to. But the idea that you stab a goblin and suddenly you know how to cast fireballs always kind of...
The secrets of the universe
are
unraveled.
Me,
yeah,
right?
It's a bit much for sure. That's why you just start your players at level 2.
Well, that's what they do. Everyone just starts at like level 2 or level 3.
Yep.
Which is a separate design issue that I will discuss probably.
Like if the game is supposed to start at level 2, why don't you just start everyone at level 2?
Exactly. If you want, why don't you start everybody at level 3?
Yeah.
Right? Like there's no point of having it because like the world should be full of level 2 or level 3 characters because you shoot like 6 goblins, which probably every single farmer has done to prevent them from raiding his sheep, and suddenly like, hey, look at that, I'm magic, right? Like, anyways, right? All of this training happens in your life to learn how to be a level 1 fighter, and then suddenly you're a level 2 fighter. It bugs me. It's a design issue. So that's why I would start this adventure at level 2, so you don't level up in the middle of it.
Yeah, and this is really where the adventure starts.
Yes, exactly. Everything up to this point is just like
fluff.
It's setting the stage, right? It's all thematic. It's all trying to
not
foreshadow.
Even really. It doesn't even foreshadow the things that are in the basement. It gives you no hints as to what would be down there. You never really find anything about the cult. You never really find anything that says that there were sacrifices in the basement. You never really find anything aside from the kids in the beginning that says there's a monster in the basement. Like there's nothing even that leads to you assuming that the cellar area, the basement, is as dangerous as it is.
That's actually a really good point. And this kind of could be solved a little bit by going back to like my alternative suggestion for the initial hook. Like if you have some sort of NPC that's talking about the house, this type of information, this could be a rumor, right? Like you could have the rumor of the house that all of this stuff was happening, like as a lure, once again, to get the players to want to go explore it. Right, because if you don't know anything about the house, why do you care? Well, you care because your DM tells you that you should care about the house and you have to do this adventure now, right?
Yeah.
Anywho, But that's a good point. So we go through all this. We get to our role play with the ghosts a little bit.
Yeah.
You're gonna get possessed, or you're gonna kill the ghosts of children because you're a horrible person.
Yeah.
And we go down 3 flights of stairs.
Yeah, lots.
All the way into the sub basement, where we now have the actual dungeon,
Which is where the cult members hung out and lived and performed their rituals. Which there are, I mean, it's a pretty big area as well.
It's about as big as everything else.
Yeah, but there's the encounters down in here, I would say, are lethal.
Most of them have the potential to be.
Yeah.
But very few of them are like automatic. Now, I will say, like, considering how boring the rest of the house has been, all the flavor gets put into this floor.
Yeah.
There's chanting.
Yeah.
There's ghostly chanting the entire time you're in it.
As soon as you go downstairs.
And you can actually use it to get to the chapel or whatever they call it so you can actually use it to guide yourself through the thing, which is super neat. There's a dining hall where there's just like the bones of humanoids everywhere, right? Implying cannibalism. Obviously, you could make that even more gruesome. So this is where like the real like cool stuff happens. Now that might be by design. That the idea that on the surface levels everything looks like your normal, middle class family.
See, that's why I think it could be neat if you used some of the descriptions of the basement in the paintings upstairs, where maybe like a picture upstairs is like the dining table downstairs, but it goes from being like skeletal and like gross to just a normal picture. Like it changed, like the house changes it, so it gives people the hint that there's something more going on. Like why else would they explore? That could be like flavor that you could add to the house.
Like you could have people,
like at first glance it looks like a thing. You look at it a little bit closer and you get the image of like
you
people eating people.
That it's
right?
not actually a suckling pig on the table. It's a
torso.
baby or a torso or something like that. Yeah, no, that's actually that's a great point.
Yeah. Like add little things like that where it's not consistent, but like maybe the house is changing things. Like the house is trying to get these people downstairs.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean...
Yeah, it's basically forcing you to go downstairs.
Yeah, which is like kind of weird because I don't know, is the house possessed by the ghosts of the cult? Like,
let's not think too much about this because magic, Paul. Because magic. I think it's the whole idea that like, such an unspeakable horrors happened in here over so many years. Like the evil of those acts has seeped into the foundation. I think it's that type of idea. Which once again, like it's totally fine in any type of setting. That's a pretty common sort of trope. One
of the first encounters that you run into down here is you fight like 5 ghouls.
You fight ghouls. You can actually. The first encounter is a grick, whatever. Don't even have it in here. Like, just get rid of it. Like, there's literally no point. Like, we want it to be a carrion crawler, but that's too hard. So, like, so we gave our non-union equivalent of the grick. I would not. It's a pointless encounter. It's there completely because you probably have players that are bored at this point. So it's like, here, fight something. Ta-da. Ta-da. Moving on. But
ghouls. I'm sure the adventure says it's 4 or 5 ghouls.
It's 4 ghouls for sure, and then there's shadows down here as well.
And shadows later on too. But like, if you have a party of 4 or 5, even still, if you're paralyzed every single round for all those rounds, you might not even make it to the end.
Well, it's called Death House.
Yeah,
it's not supposed to be like okay house, good times house, right? Like it's right there in the name.
I guess so.
Right?
Yeah.
So presumably your players should be on board with the idea that we die in the death house. I think ghouls are pretty tough. At level 2, 4, I assume the idea is like this is for 4 or 5 players, so you're 4 and 4. They have low AC. The DC is not super hard, so bad luck obviously will kill your entire party.
Yeah.
My complaint with ghouls is just they get used way too much, and from an undead standpoint, they make no sense to be in here.
Oh yeah.
Right? Ghouls are intelligent undead that hunger for flesh, right? So I guess we're just going to hand wave and say like the house, and they're buried too. Like the house forces them to be under the dirt until somebody comes there, even though isn't the whole point for someone being down there is for the players to get to the actual altar. Like what's the house's end game? I guess it's a house, so it's probably just dumb, right? But like, I guess maybe I'm just not supposed to read too much into this. I guess.
Yeah.
So the ghouls is super hard. There's a shadow encounter, 5 shadows. Which now, that being said, the shadows only trigger if you mess with the statue of Strahd. Right? So it's a triggered encounter. Now, that being said, Strahd's carrying like the statue's holding like a big glass globe that says, "Ooh, shiny, take me."
You're gonna mess with it.
Like it's tempting enough to mess with it. And I think the 5 shadows, yeah. Like that's the strength damage alone. Right? I mean, shadows aren't nearly as scary in 5th edition than they were in other editions because you can actually hit them.
Yeah.
Right? Like in older editions, like they would just be immune to physical damage and you just die.
But especially if you don't have like a party of high strength heroes. I mean,
or players that have magic damage. You know, like this is a good opportunity. If you have a cleric, you're laughing. Like clerics will shine in this type of campaign. So maybe encourage. You know, if you're especially running Curse of Strahd, like you should probably have a cleric in there who's going to be undead. So yeah, I mean that's another place where you could. And I mean this is the thing that might kind of be disappointing because there's a lot of nothing. And then you get into an encounter and it's super hard and you all die.
Yeah.
Right? Like, end game over. And it's not even the type of situation where you're just like, and then a bunch of other random people come to find your body and whatnot. Like, nah, you basically got to start the whole adventure again with new players. And you just move on and you do another.
You make those players come back as zombies, vampire players to fight your new party later on down the road.
Yeah, they're the zombie minions of Strahd.
Yeah,
right?
he finally got his playthings.
Yeah. So, that there's a potential to be disappointing. I don't know. Like, do you just make it easier? Do you just cut those encounters? Like,
I think you do. I think you do a little bit because I want to get to the end of this.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Now, there is one thing that I thought is a good suggestion change, and I do think getting rid of the shadows themselves also kind of like makes a bit of sense. It's a bit hard. I mean, you can have a shadow in there. But fine-tuning encounters in 5th edition, I find, is just difficult.
Or let them beat it mechanically. They light torches. The shadows vanish. You could think of let them have something clever to beat it, I guess.
Well, I mean, that goes in any type of encounter.
Yeah.
But yeah, you definitely want to get to the end. And then, what else is down here? There's the Lord and Lady of the Manor, the Rose and Thorn's parents, which, once again, they're guests for some reason. Mm-hmm. They hang out in bricked up alcoves in their bedroom for
they're
no
through the secret
reason.
Door, aren't they? They're like mudded up door. Is that what that is?
They're hiding behind mudded up alcoves.
Yeah.
Once again, like, why? So like I actually thought hard about this because I don't like this. Comes into like, why are there gas there? What is the point of this? This is all kind of So what I was actually thinking is it would be super interesting in this adventure is if the parents actually loved their kids. Because in the writing, they talk about like, oh, the kids died from neglect because the parents just stopped feeding them. What if the parents put the kids in that room to protect them from the other cults? And I was actually thinking about this. Like, you could actually have like glyphs of warding etched into the doors and into the lock and all that type of stuff.
That's cool.
That the kids are in there for their protection, and the only reason they starved to death is because Strahd killed them all.
Right.
And then the parents couldn't let the kids out. So if you have the situation where the parents actually cared about their children, so what I was thinking is I can't remember what room it is, but it's like the room that's right before getting to the altar or something like that. What I was thinking is you could make that room or one of the other rooms haunted by the parents. Like, that's the one thing. There should be a room somewhere where the slaughter happened, where Strahd killed everybody, right? If you have them as ghosts, what I would do is I'd make them like an environmental effect. Like, their grief and rage and their guilt, like they know their kids
are dead.
Probably died.
Yeah.
Right? If you have it their environmental block. Like, the idea is that you're not supposed to fight them.
Yeah.
Right? You make it more like of a poltergeist. Like, you start to walk into the room and the temperature starts to drop, and then there's like wind effects and like bones start flying everywhere, and like you're forced back basically. But I was thinking if there were them, then there's a reason for having the ghosts, the kid ghosts.
And there's also a reason to lay them to rest.
Right, and I wouldn't even think necessarily that you have to lay them to rest. And this is something that's in there. If you find the tombs of everybody.
Yeah. So
if you take the kids' bones to the tomb, you can lay them to rest and blah blah blah. But what I was thinking is if you could allow the kids to possess you, you could bring them to their parents, and then you could literally have an amazing role play situation where like the parents and the children's spirits are reunited, and then like mechanically basically you bring the ghosts to their parents, and then that like breaks the environmental effect, and then the party can continue, right? But I think that's kind of a cool idea, mostly because it adds some nuance to the cult leaders, right? Like you can be an awful person and still like your kids, and still love your kids. So like suddenly this is a lot.
They knew Strahd was coming. Like the letter could be a warning as opposed to like,
you know, I've had enough of your meddling. You know, like
hide your wife, hide your kids.
You know, my displeasure shall rain ruin down upon your household or something like that. Like you could totally do that. There could be garlic and crucifixes and all types of stuff in the kids' room as a protection against
smart.
Strahd, right?
That'd add a lot more flavor to the room, which could go back to the whole theme as if the dead adventurer you found was a, you know, it makes you know that a vampire is in charge of this, that there's no real hooks to Strahd at all aside from the letter, right, and the statue. He's just a thing, but this makes him a lot more real.
That they were protecting him from the vampires and whatnot.
That's a good idea.
And I just think it adds a lot more nuance to the whole situation, and it's really easy to sort of cartoonify villains. And this way you see them more as complex individuals than just being one thing. Right? Cannibalistic, you know, cultists, which granted, they're not nice people, right? But they
still like their kids.
They still love their kids, right?
Yeah, that's a really great idea.
So I that randomly came to my head, and I thought that would be kind of fun to do. So regardless of whether you run it as is or whatnot, eventually you end up going to a room where there's an altar. And this altar is attached to an area that has a shambling mound, which your players do not want to fight at level 2. Should kill them all in a perfect world. But this is where, once again, I kind of like ran into something that I'm like, really? So the altar is the trigger for the next fun stuff, right? I think this is where the chanting is coming from and blah, blah. But nothing triggers if they don't go on the altar.
Correct.
There's no reason for them to go on the altar.
Right.
So this is where my initial change to the hook comes in, like where you need to have some sort of reason. There's a golden idol. There's money. There's treasure. There's a book, right? There needs to be something that the players want. And granted,
shiny dagger through the corpse of something up there.
Whatever you want, right? But there should be some sort of anything to entice the players to go onto the altar, which then triggers the best part of the adventure.
Maybe, like this is the point of the adventure where like the adventure really gets its name, because most all or some of your party is they have to die.
Well, because in a perfect world, yes,
they can only appease the house by sacrificing something on.
If you get to the altar, it triggers an event.
Yes, the chanting changes.
So the chanting changes, and basically the cultists appear. And blah 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 blah. You are told that you have to sacrifice something on the altar. You need a sacrifice.
So if you sacrifice something, the house is appeased.
And you can leave.
You can leave the house. It will not stop you from doing so. If you don't, and you leave I'm not sure what the trigger is on the shambling mound, but if you leave the altar without sacrificing something, the shambling mound activates.
The cultists tell it to awaken.
So they start chanting something else. But it will follow you, but not leave the basement.
Exactly.
So you're meant to run from it.
Of course. It's got 150 some odd hit points. You should run from it.
Are your players even smart enough to know that they should run from this?
Well,
like, I guess if it murdered one thing. So maybe it murders one person in one round. But so assuming that I think it would be fantastic if your party sacrificed one of its players. So this adventure ends wonderfully no matter what.
Now, whether they do that or not, this is where I'd be kind of concerned, because as written, there seems to be a lot of leeway in what you can sacrifice.
But what are they going to have to sacrifice?
Animal companion?
Yeah, but then you have to start thinking about...
Should a ranger allow them to have an animal companion? Sacrifice their animal companion?
Alignment? Like if a ranger's willing to sacrifice his animal companion?
Well, they shouldn't be okay with it. But then again, you get into like...
But then that's when you might get your ranger fighting your party.
Yeah.
right? Like if you this ends good no matter what.
Well, I mean, ultimately, there's no reason why the players would want to comply with the request.
No.
And that's the big thing. Now, that being said, if you did some foreshadowing and maybe there's been some whispers in your ear about the power will be yours,
Yeah.
then maybe there'll be some incentive for your less goodish characters for wanting to do that. So that, I mean, that either if they sacrifice something, the adventure ends kind of okay, yeah, great. But they killed somebody, and there's a lot of sort of interpersonal consequences of that, and alignment consequences for sure. If they sacrifice somebody, they should just be cursed forever. They are now bound to Barovia, and you're never leaving. Right?
Yeah.
Like there needs to be some mark on their soul.
Start your evil campaign.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there should be, even if there's a boon, like you can just give them a boon. Like, it doesn't have to be anything particular. Once per day, they have advantage on a reroll or something like that, on a saving throw, or some sort of
They've got the mark of Strahd.
Well, exactly. Like, I think you should give them like a mark. Like now, maybe they get a tattoo on their like a mark on their faces or something. Like it should be something obvious.
Yeah.
And now there's a boon associated with it. Like, so they should get something for sacrificing a player other than just getting out of the house.
Yep.
Whatever that is. Like, it depends on the power level of your campaign and yada, yada, yada. But I think they should get something.
For sure, yeah.
From that. But they should be marked.
They all of a sudden hate garlic.
They're tainted now, right? There's
Definitely,
a black mark on their souls, and maybe like, you know, animals shy away from them now because, you know, horses refuse to bear them, and, you know,
Like the vampire, not vampire.
Yeah,
They have no reflections anymore.
Exactly. You could do something fun about that.
So if they get out of the basement and away from the shambling mound, this is where
if they didn't do a sacrifice.
Yeah. So if they don't sacrifice and they get out back into the house is actively trying to stop them from leaving.
It is
Brutal.
awesome.
The windows are bricked.
Yep.
Every single doorway has scythes spinning through them.
You need to make ability checks or intelligence check or dexterity check to get
the
through them.
rooms are full of poisonous gas.
Now, this is where we come back to, like, describing the rooms is important because it's only certain rooms. It's rooms that had fireplaces or something else, torches or sensors or something like that.
So, I mean...
And they do a ton of damage.
Yeah, like D10's worth of damage. And even if starting at level 2, yeah, maybe low 20s HP for some of your high constitution players.
Yep.
But
And also,
I don't know how many doors you actually have to go through to get out. I never counted.
I can't remember because I can't remember if the other secret door is revealed
Right.
if you don't sacrifice them. I can't remember what the trigger is for that one, because if you have to start on the attic and work your way down, it's a lot different than if you start in the kitchen and have to work your way. And I just can't remember off the top of my head from the adventure whether that's the case or not.
That would be up to your players whether or not they remember or which way to go. Anyway,
Yeah,
if they don't know, if they never found that secret door, didn't go through it, they might not think to go that way. Anyway, you have to make dex saves to jump through the doors, or you can spend time studying them to...
Intelligence checks to measure the timing.
So there's
and whatnot.
either a dex check or an int check to get through them.
What I loved is, like, they even account that now the house looks decrepit.
Mm-hmm.
So if players think that, okay, we'll just break through the walls, they totally can, but it releases rat swarms.
Yeah.
And every time you break through a section of wall, another rat swarm shows up. And then assuming you can survive the death house and you get to the front door, you can get out and you survive.
So yeah, an awesome escape. I think the end of this adventure is great.
I think it's fantastic that there's environmental stuff that happened. The only type of things to sort of think about is, like, what's to stop your players from going room to room and then having a long rest every time they make it through.
Yeah.
So I think it needs some type of
A timer. There needs to be a timer on it. Yeah.
There needs to be something that's prevents them. I don't know, and how strict of your timer, like whether you'd allow short rests but not long rests, like that's up to you. But there needs to be some.
You have a creeping gas from behind you or something, like a mist is coming up from your feet the longer they spend trying to figure out doors and get through stuff. But yeah, you're right, a timer would be good because there's nothing to stop them from just sleeping in the attic. And
right, I mean, even if it was something as simple as, like, the shambling mound doesn't stop following them,
yeah,
and, like, the house lets it through the rooms,
yeah,
right, like that type of thing to me would put a little bit more pressure on the players. Like, there needs to be something to not let them sort of game the system. So whatever that works out to be, and that's totally up to you. So
yeah.
like the I don't know, the likelihood of your players getting through this adventure should be pretty low.
Yeah, no kidding.
Unless they
sacrifice someone.
Unless they sacrifice someone, which then, you know, as we've discussed previously, should have ramifications on their souls. So, I mean, that's partly, the whole deadliness of this adventure is partly why I think there should be something of note in it. Like, you should get something for having done all of this.
Yeah, because you don't get rewarded.
There's some minor magical items, there's some treasure, but once again, some of that might just be balanced because this is supposed to be a lead into Curse of Strahd, which then has its own setup of treasure. But especially if you're running this as just a one-off haunted house, which is awesome because you can totally set this up for like any level of party if you want.
Yeah,
you can make your scary monster thing have his whatever stats that you want. You can make whatever type of undead in there, and the traps can be as deadly as you decide to be. Right, so that's totally scalable. But I think there should be, like I said, something on the altar or something that they get monetarily or otherwise for actually surviving this whole thing. Because you shouldn't survive. You should totally.
Oh yeah,
totally
most everyone should die.
And I love and if you make it out of the adventure, congratulations, you're now level 3. Right? So I guess the intention is that you're not supposed to die, but you want them to, in a perfect world, you want them to get to that conundrum.
Yep.
You want them to make the hard moralistic decision. And once again, I think there's something to be said for having some sort of temptation, other than them just being like, no.
Yeah. No thanks. Yeah.
So make that more of a difficult decision. Because they don't really know of the consequences until after the fact, right? Like, wait, no, we'll sacrifice them now, totally. There's
a shambling mound blocking their way at that point.
At that point, right? They don't really know of that, so that's. I'd make sure there's some sort of a boon to them in the end, and I think that's great. What should happen to the house after the fact? I don't know. If it's in Barovia, it's just there forever.
Implode on itself like a poltergeist or whatever it is.
That would be kind of awesome. Well, maybe that's the follow-up adventure, right? They find out to destroy the house, they need to, bring a certain holy object to the altar, and then they can destroy it or something like that. So,
in the end, it was just a bored bard, and that was his magical mansion that he created.
Yeah, there could be all kinds of fun stuff in there. I think the ending is the best part. You definitely want to get there. Is there anything else you wanted to say about the adventure?
No, slow start, great ending. Can be fun for any level of player.
And you can't beat the price, right?
Yeah, free.
Anywho, if you've run Death House, let us know. We'd like to hear how it worked out for you, or if we're completely out to lunch and we completely misinterpreted this adventure. We'd like to hear from you. Twitter, email, information's in the usual place you find this type of stuff. And once again, if you have any adventures you'd like to hear us ramble about, hit us up, let us know. We're always interested in hearing what you have to say. But thanks very much for listening.